Most people think of fat as something that they just want to get rid of, but what if it wasn't just sitting there, but it was actually metabolically active? Fat doesn't just sit on your hips and your butt and your belly, but it acts like an organ, sending signals and hormones throughout your body, which can affect your brain, your organs, and your different metabolic markers like your sugar and your cholesterol. There's also different kinds of fat, some of which are very harmful to your overall health, and others which may actually be beneficial. Today, we're going to explore the hidden side of fat. By the end of this talk, you're going to have a completely different understanding of how fat works in your body. Fat is not just this inert blob that just sits there, but it's a part of your body's communication network, your immune system and your defenses, sending different hormones to influence your body. Fat is a part of this sort of telecommunication network in your body. It's sending out different signals and hormones, which allows organs to talk to each other. It can send hormones to things like your liver and your pancreas, influencing what they do. And usually this is a good thing. So fat has an enzyme in it called aromatase, which changes different sex hormones to estrogen. It also releases something called adiponectin, which helps control your metabolism and reduce inflammation. But when the proportion of fat is increased, this can be a bad thing. And we do see this with something that fat releases, which is the hunger hormone leptin. So leptin is a hormone produced by fat, which travels to your brain to send the signal, hey, I'm not hungry anymore, I'm full, I don't need to eat anything. This was seen in a now famous experiment with Dr. Sylvia Tara's book, The Hidden Life of Fat. Scientists did this horrific experiment looking back where they took two different mice and sutured them together so that their blood supply was shared. One mouse had very, very high levels of leptin and had faulty receptors in their brain to sense this hormone. The other mouse had normal receptors in the brain for leptin, but faulty hormone production of leptin. What they found once they sutured these mice together was very interesting. The mouse that had the normal receptors in its brain for sensing leptin, but the low levels, once it shared that blood supply, starved to death. And here's how this is relevant to people. If people are metabolically unhealthy, they kind of resemble this mouse that had the high levels of leptin but couldn't sense it in their brain. Something called leptin resistance, which is actually the definition of this issue, is when people have very high levels of leptin produced by fat and they can't sense it. So a lot of times it leads to excessive hunger. As fat levels rise, so do levels of leptin a lot of times. And when this happens, your brain stops sensing leptin as well. It's like in this telecommunication network example I was talking about earlier, fat releases way too much radio waves, which causes like an interference in your brain so that it can't sense this signal that tells it it's full. So a lot of times people will feel hungry very frequently. Now the interesting thing is that when I'm talking about this, you're probably imagining someone who's very overweight or obese. But the truth is that you don't have to be overweight at all, and you could be at a completely normal body weight to have issues with fat. And that's because there is a type of fat that you can't see just by looking at someone or measuring their weight. It's hidden in your organs and it's called visceral fat. Perhaps the most harmful aspect of fat is that it can cause widespread inflammation throughout your body. If you were to look at a biopsy of fat, you would notice that there are immune cells and macrophages all throughout it. And this highlights something that's really interesting about fat, is that it can cause systemic inflammation. And visceral fat on your organs is especially problematic when it comes to chronic inflammation. It sends quite a few inflammatory markers throughout your body. And like I was saying before, you can be at a normal body weight or even thin and have a lot of visceral fat. TOFI refers to thin on the outside but fat on the inside. This is talking about somebody who's at a normal body weight, but they have a lot of this visceral fat. And this is how a lot of times people can be at a perfectly normal body weight, but have very high levels of sugar, very poorly controlled diabetes. It's because this visceral fat is causing issues in the background. The way that we evaluate fat in the office, it's just sort of a crude estimate of how much weight someone has or where their weight should be. The body mass index is just looking at someone's height to weight ratio, and it can leave a lot of things out. The easiest way to see if someone has visceral fat is checking their waist circumference. If someone's waist circumference is, for a man, over 40 inches or for a woman over 35 inches, it's very likely that they have chronic inflammation and other metabolic issues. And if you're currently higher than those thresholds, that's okay. There's always room to improve, but there is another aspect of fat that is especially concerning, perhaps even more so than inflammation, is that it can create an environment where cancer can grow. So if we go with this example that I had earlier, imagine that there was this double agent that took over this telecommunications network and used it to cover up this widespread infiltration of its agents. This can be how cancer works in the body with excess body fat. Now, I'm not saying that if you have excess body fat, you're going to get cancer, but it is a risk factor for cancer for good reason. So there was a recent JAMA Review article that went into this much further, this link with fat and cancer. So normally your immune system has this sort of patrol system out that's looking for bad guys or abnormal cells like cancer cells. And then if it finds it, it will eliminate them. Fat causes chronic inflammation, which suppresses your immune system and allows fat to work in the background hidden to grow. One of the hallmarks of cancer is that it can grow at an unbelievably fast rate. And fat actually provides it with a supply so that it can continue to grow. And that's because fat is essentially stored energy. And so cancer uses this to its advantage in different ways. One is that it sort of hijacks fat. It can use things like free fatty acids and lipids to take this energy and help it grow at this incredibly fast rate. It also can hijack the blood supply in fat. Fat utilizes something called angiogenesis, which is the creation of blood vessels to help perfuse and keep fat alive. And cancer can use this to its advantage so that it can grow. So now it has this supply so that it can grow very, very quickly, and it can sort of do it under the radar because the immune system is suppressed and your immune system can't sense these cancer cells. Now, this may sound terrifying, but just remember, if you have excess fat, it doesn't mean you're going to get cancer, but it is a risk factor. Now, the interesting thing is that there are different types of fat, as I've mentioned, and one of them may actually be helpful for your overall metabolic health, and that is called brown fat. So white fat is the fat that we're all aware of, that you can see just by looking in the mirror. The other fat that I'm referring to is called brown fat, which is this very highly metabolically active fat. The reason that it's actually called brown fat is because of the way it looks. When you look at brown fat, it's actually really dense with something called mitochondria, which are the power plants of your body that create energy. Now, I'm not saying that brown fat is this silver bullet that's going to take care of everything in your body, but it is a really interesting area of research. And there are different ways to increase brown fat. One being exercise. Your muscles release these hormones called myokines, which one of them are called irisin, which can convert white fat to beige fat and brown fat. The other is, of course, cold exposure, which different studies have shown can increase the levels of brown fat in your body. So in conclusion, the goal is not just to lose fat, but to change what fat does in your body. Obviously, we want to lose visceral fat. Visceral fat is very harmful for your overall health. Try to replace ultra-processed foods with whole foods, and exercise, of course, will help change this balance. Brown fat is a really interesting area to look into. There are different cold exposure protocols that people talk about. It's something that's still being experimented with and studied. But maybe having cold showers can help this. Of course, if you're going to do something like that, different medical conditions can be a contraindication to doing that. So talk to whoever your primary care provider is. And if you want to learn how not only fat can act like an organ, but actually muscle can as well, which can help everything perform better, check out my next video here. And thank you guys so much for checking in. I really appreciate it.